Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside The Last Gamble, the Ardennes Offensive, December 1944. This is a game designed by Danny Parker and is published by Compass Games. Well, this is one of the two really big releases from Compass this year. The first we've already seen on the channel, Iron Armor, and the second is The Last Gamble, which just released this week. It is now heading out to gamers' doors everywhere, and when it lands on your doorstep, be careful because this is a big, heavy box and you don't want to throw your back out. It weighs in at 8 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you pick this box up, it definitely feels a lot heavier than just 8 pounds. There is a lot of stuff in this box. It is chock full of historical greatness from Danny and his team, who did an amazing job on this game. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. The Last Gamble DSC covers the last major German offensive on the Western Front in World War II, which took place in the Ardennes region of Belgium and Luxembourg in the winter of 1944. Codenamed Wacht am Rhein, its objective was Antwerp. Capturing that strategic port, Hitler believed would turn the tide of the war. The ensuing Battle of the Bulge, as it is known in the West, saw the most dramatic fighting since D-Day. Yet the Allies were able to turn back Hitler's armies before the Meuse River and seal his defeat. This designer signature edition includes many new features, completely reevaluated terrain, and the most comprehensive regimental scale order of battle ever published in a Bulge game, along with a detailed evaluation of unit strength, combat characteristics, and morale. 4 2-map scenarios are included, along with a new introductory 1-map scenario covering the pivotal Battle Before the Meuse. Physically superior, a larger, extremely detailed map, 5/8-inch counters, and a wealth of historical background and supporting data that reaches a new level of detail, truly a book that you can play. And you can see an example of the map and the counters here. For the components, you get 2 map sheets, 34 by 22 inch, and one that is 25 by 21 inch, 6 counter sheets, rulebook, historical background booklet, scenario booklet, player aids, axis order of appearance displays, allied order of appearance displays, and 2 6-sided dice. It is rated as 7 to 9 out of 10 on complexity. Time scale 8-hour day turns, 16-hour night turns. Map scale is 3.2 kilometers per hex. Unit scale regiments and battalions. Number of players 1 to 4, best with 2. Suitability for solitaire is 8 out of 10, and the average time to play is 3 to 8 hours for scenarios and 20 plus hours for campaign. And you hear that big satisfying thud as we flip the box over. So let's take a look inside and see what we get. All right, we got our baggies and dice. Got a pack of 3 books. Counter sheets, shrink wrapped. Got a couple pages of errata. A big, thick mound of player aids. And then we've got another thick amount of player aids as well as the maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And here's a look at the map that comes with the game. We've got the 2 maps laid one on top of the other to create the entire overall map, and it is beautifully done. I love the work that Ilya Kudryashov did on this map, just really fantastic. Nice and thick maps too, like we had with Iron Armor. Got that cardstock map, so these are going to last a really long time, which is fantastic. Of course, we're still going to put plexi on them, but it lays nice and flat, no worrying about tearing with these thicker maps like you do with a paper map. I love that they're doing that now, and I hope that is the case all the way through the rest of their games. As you can see, really busy terrain on this map. We're going to take a closer look here because there's not a lot of extras. There's only the terrain key at the top left because everything else is done with the player aid cards, and there are a ton of player aid cards, which we're going to look at next. But let's take a closer look at the map, and we can take a look at some of the pieces of terrain that you'll be dealing with in The Last Gamble. Okay, so I zoomed in really close to some of the hexes on the map because when we're looking at the overall map, you just can't see all of the detail, and detail is very important in this game. so I wanted to zoom in so you could take a closer look at some of the terrain features in these hexes. Right here, this is rough terrain. Next to that is clear terrain. Inside this clear terrain, we have two different features. We have this road right here, and then next to that, we have a village. Then we have forest hexes and woods hexes right here. Next to that, we have the river, and then of course, to cross the river, you've got these two fords. That's what's going to get you across the river, or the heavy bridge right here. And of course, the most talked about feature on this map and in this game, for movement especially, is going to be these severe terrain hex sides. And this is going to be a real challenge to everybody, because when it comes to movement, it's really going to restrict your movement. You cannot pass into these hexes unless you cross a road if you're a vehicle, because these are going to be steep ravines and slopes. You can't just drive a tank off a slope. Well, you can, but it's going to end very, very badly for you. So you need a road to be able to enter that type of terrain. And if you've ever gone to Google Earth and taken a look at the area itself, you'll see how steep these areas are. You can easily do that and do a comparison between the map and what you see on Google Earth, and you'll say, wow, this is really difficult terrain to maneuver through. And I do love the way that they've depicted that here, because it is going to make it very difficult for people to move. Movement is going to be the toughest aspect of this game by far. That's why when I was talking to Danny at Expo last year, I said, we need to do a video on movement alone, and we did with the TLG video series, and we should title it Movement is a Bitch, because it is gonna be a bitch moving through the Ardennes, as it should be. But that's a closer look at some of the terrain features on the main map. And then the other map is the Battle Before the Muse map, and there is one on-map feature, and that is the turn record track at the top left. But as you can see, it is a much smaller scenario. That's why this is recommended to be the starting point, because it's a smaller area to manage, really easy map to get on anybody's table. And this way you can work through all of the challenges that you're going to work through in the main game without having to have all that table space used up and the higher counter density. Here it's going to be lower counter density, smaller map, but you're going to be facing the exact same challenges that you're going to be facing on the big map, just in a smaller area. So I think that's really fantastic that they've got this smaller scenario to get us started on our journey in this game. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids that come with the game, and there are a lot of them. So we're going to go through the ones that you're going to be using with each game in more detail, and then we're going to just look through briefly the others that are the orders of battle and the scenario setup cards, the tracks, all those player aid cards we're going to look at a little quicker. But here we're going to go through the main player aid cards that you'll be using while playing. Start off with the sequence of play, breaking down all the phases of the game for you. On the back, we have the weather tables, uncertain weather table, and the uncertain weather modifiers. On the next sheet, we have the terrain chart, which is the same as the terrain key that you have on the map. This is not going to give you the terrain effects. That is on a separate player aid card. This just gives you the graphical representation of each of the different types of terrain on the map. On the back, we have the manifest of charts, and this is a great example of what I'm talking about when it comes to going through all of these player aid cards. This is a listing of all of the player aid cards that you're going to have in this game. For example, you have 4 16 December air order of appearance charts, 7 22 December high water mark bulge ground unit setup charts, 8 Das Eisen Schmieden ground unit setup charts, as well as a whole bunch of others that are just onesie twosies. But you can see there are a lot of player aid cards that come with this game. And thankfully, we have this manifest to keep track of them all. On the next sheet, we have the game markers chart listing out all the different types of markers and how they're used in the game, as well as their rules references on the right-hand side. On the back, we have the commando tables for commando elimination and commando combat deception. On the next sheet, we have the movement modification tables covering strategic movement and the movement combination table. On the back, we have the terrain effects chart. This is going to go along with the terrain chart we saw before, which just told you what each of the different types of terrain pieces were. Here, it's going to give you a listing of all their costs. We have a listing of them on the left-hand side, and then we have columns for motorized and non-motorized, telling you the ground conditions for each of those and the associated costs. You have firm, mud, frozen, and snow. Some of the pieces of terrain have notes at the end of them, and those notes are down here at the bottom of the player aid card. On the next sheet, we have the combat modification chart, giving you modification of attack or defense strength, along with combat odd shifts and the combined arms die roll modifiers. That carries over to the back where we have the combat modification tables for combined arms, armor superiority, combat coordination, and the close air support tables. Next, we have the combat results table. We've got two different tables here, one for day turns and one for night turns. And then, of course, you have your combat results explained to you at the bottom. On the back, we have the artillery modification table, giving us charts for the Allied and Germans for both day and night. On the next sheet, we have the air tables for air attack and air interdiction. On the back, we have a few more tables for German fuel capture, German fuel shortages, and the fuel dump demolition table. On the next sheet, we have some illustrated movement examples. On the back, we have illustrated examples for air operations. On the next sheet, we have bridge tables for bridge demolition, bridge interdiction, the Oran Bridge uncertainty, and bridge discovery. On the back, we have the zone of control chart for both AM and PM turns. And then at the bottom, we have illustrated examples of each of the different types of zones of control you can have in this game. And on the final player aid sheet, we have optional rules and variants. A listing of the different optional rules you can use on the left-hand side, and then game variants for both German and Allied on the right. Then we finish out the player aid cards with this on the back for illustrated complex combat examples. Well, remember when I told you there are a lot of player aid cards? Well, here's the proof. You've got 4 different thick stacks of player aid cards for each of the different scenarios / campaign. Bottom right, we have the Last Blitzkrieg and Wacht am Rhein. Last Blitzkrieg is the 8-turn version of the campaign scenario, Wacht am Rhein. Top right, we have Das Eisen Schmieden. Bottom left, we have 16 December and 22nd December, and then we have the temporary rules tables at the top left. We're not going to go through all of them because there are a ton of them, and you don't need to see all of them because it's going to be a lot of redundant information. Instead, what we are going to take a look at is the Battle Before the Meuse scenario, which is the one that they recommend to start with anyway, so let's take a look at that one. Gives you the dates at the top. We've got 23rd December to 26th December 1944, victory conditions, victory levels, and then your instant victory as well as some historical notes. On the back, you're going to have tracks for Wacht am Rhein because you're not going to need the front of the sheet when you're playing Wacht am Rhein, so the track is going to be on the back of the sheet here. Then we've got our order of battle cards for the Germans. This is going to give you all of the on-map units that are going to be there as well as their associated hex numbers. Then we have the reinforcements and the times and days they come in. For example, the first ones come in 23rd December in the PM turn, 24 December AM, 24 December PM, so on and so forth. And that is going to carry over for the Germans to the second sheet, as well as having some German notes at the bottom. Then we have the Allies on the next sheet. It's going to be the same thing. These are the units that start on map, and then the reinforcements based on the time and day they come in. And that carries all the way through to the end. And then we have the Allied notes at the bottom. Once you see that, you're going to see what all of these others will have without having to go through all the OOBs for each of them. Like I said, it's going to be redundant information because depending on the date and time, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff because those were the units that were out there. But this gives you an idea of the depth and breadth of the orders of battle and what you can look forward to for each of these scenarios in this game. Next, we'll take a look at the counter sheets that come with the game, and we start off with the U.S. forces. Yes, these are U.S., not in green as you see traditionally in war games, but more in the authentic color that they wore in World War II. We've got our U.S. ground forces on the first sheet, and those carry over to the second sheet to include also the air forces. At the top, we have British units, and then the German Luftwaffe, and then the start of the German ground forces at the bottom right. There are also a couple of Belgian units in here as well. On the third sheet, the German forces continue. On the next sheet, we have the remainder of the German forces, primarily SS units, as well as the commando units that were used in Operation Greif. They are also in this game. Then for the remainder of the sheet, we have administrative counters on the right-hand side. And on the final two counter sheets, we have the remainder of the administrative counters for use in the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 75-page full-color rulebook. Inside of the front cover, we start off with the table of contents listing out all the different rules and their associated page numbers. Start off with the introduction, and then we have a listing of all the components that come with the game. Unit breakdown here, so you know how to read all the information on the counters. The different types of units that are in the game. The map hexes and their associated terrain, so you know what each of the terrain features is and what it does in the game. Then we get to how the game is played on page 10. Have the weather phase and a breakdown of all the different types of weather and how they affect gameplay. Supply phase, supply determination, supply lines, and general supply, so sources of supply. Unsupplied units, German fuel capture, German fuel shortages. And we have good order units, isolated units, surrender, replacement phase, scheduled replacement points, combat replacement points, rebuilding reduced units, and rebuilding eliminated units. Then we get to the air phase, air mission allocation, German V weapons, non-battlefield interception, air resupply, air interdiction. Then we have air attack, movement phase, and the different types of movement that are available to you in the game. Illustrated example here. Got strategic movement and then entering and exiting. Strategic movement, movement, forced march. Then we have the terrain effects on movement and the different types of terrain features and how they affect movement are all broken down here, like lake and reservoir hex sides, river hex sides, bridges, severe terrain hex sides, things like that. Bridge demolition, because when you have a bridge, you got to blow it or build it. Road marsh hex sides, non-road marsh hex sides, marsh terrain, fords. A lot of terrain features in this game that you're going to have to negotiate. Specialized movement by unit type. Gives you some information on moving different units. And then we have reserve movement, combat reserves, reinforcements. Then we have German airdrops, restricted units, zones of control, stacking limitations, enemy reaction phase, and then we get to the combat phase on page 31. Then we have the terrain effects, again, how they affect combat, morale, combat coordination, combined arms, armor superiority. We have some special units here like German Tiger tanks, German Sturm tanks, the flame-throwing tanks, and then the engineer vulnerability. Artillery, artillery range and spotting, barrage strength modifiers, barrage attacks, offensive fire support. Special German artillery rules. Then we have close air support, ground attack support, ground defense support, and then the combat resolution procedure. Combat results, those are all explained to you here. Retreats, advance after combat, exploitation phase, combat reserves, exploitation reserves, and reserve combat. Then we have the engineer phase and bridge construction. Remember, before we saw the blowing it up, now you're building it back up. Improved positions, another thing that the engineers can do, as well as roadblocks. And we have the German surprise advantages, German movement restrictions, German traffic jams, Kampfgruppe Piper, Monschau artillery restriction, German surprise attacks, Allied combat restrictions. Then we have some optional rules here on page 52. Uncertain weather, weather effects on ground units, fuel dump capture or demolition, fuel depot capture, you've got truck head captures, hidden fuel store captures, fuel dump evacuations, fuel capture or destruction effects on US units, and then we have attack supply, Operation Spätlese, Montgomery's reaction, German jet bombers, Allied air observation, pre-planned air utilization, bridge discovery, road space, headquarters, divisional movement augmentation, prime spearhead, headquarters elimination, commandos. That's what we saw before when we were looking at the counter sheet, those commando units. That is going to be an optional rule. Then we have mountain infantry, assault crossing, Allied time on target fire, initial German artillery accuracy, and then German ammunition shortages, the fog of war. Then we have a game ports inventory on page 65. Then we have different tables here at the back. Abbreviations, replacement worksheet, attack log, German pre-planned air worksheet, Allied pre-planned air worksheet. Then we've got the German headquarters worksheet and the Allied headquarters worksheet, and then a space for some notes, and then we are at the back of the rule book. Next, we'll take a look at the game booklet. This is an 83-page full color book. Inside of the front cover, we start off with the table of contents listing out all the different sections and their associated page numbers. Start off with scenarios and victory conditions. And we have last Blitzkrieg, the track sheet as well as the scenario sheet. Same for Wacht am Rhein. Then we have 22 December high water mark of the Battle of the Bulge, giving you some background on that time period. Then we have the scenario information itself. Battle before the Meuse. Same thing, it's going to give you a little introduction text, and then we have the scenario setup and everything itself, and then the same for Das Eis and Schmieden. Then we get to game variants on page 23, which is going to give you some extra stuff that you can do as you're playing and you get some experience. You want to change some things up, you can use some of these variants for both sides, the Germans and the Allies, like free German setup, Plan Martin, all these different things that you can use to expand and enjoy your play a little bit more. And we have the Allied variants. Allies are warned, Patton hesitates. Then we get to the designer's notes on page 33. And I love the photos that are sprinkled throughout. All this history is just remarkable on top of the actual game information itself. Just flipping through these pages, looking at all this interesting text and all these really cool pictures. I apologize for the glare. I noticed there's a little bit of glare, but got kind of glossy sheets, so they're going to bounce off that light a little bit the way my lighting is set up in here. But I apologize for that, but you shouldn't have to worry about it because you probably have this game already in hand or on the way to you, and you'd be flipping through this book yourself. Those who haven't gotten this yet, this is what you have to look forward to. Then we have the scenarios and victory condition here. Then we get to Wacht am Rhein, the game as history. It's an article by Danny and Rich Hoffman, who did the TLG video series with me. Did a fantastic job on that teach. Thanks, Rich. I really appreciate it. And I know all of the gamers will as well. So if you have not watched it yet, make sure to check it out, and it'll help you grok the game a little bit quicker, I think. And then we get to the tables for German 16 December attacks, tables 2 and 3. And then we are at the back of the games booklet. And lastly, we have the historical study, which is a 119-page full-color book. Starts off with the table of contents here on the inside of the front cover, and we're going to just take a look at this first. I'm not going to look through the entire book like I normally do, 119 pages, so what I'm going to do instead is we'll flip through it. But I want to take a look at the table of contents. We start off with the historical summary here, and it's going to give you the historical situation, the battle, the place of the Ardennes campaign in World War II, an analysis, problems with reserves, so on and so forth. Then it has references and sources. Then the German order of battle and the Battle of the Bulge, Allied order of battle, and then the evaluation of unit combat strength in the Ardennes offensive. So there's going to be a lot of dense information here, and let me just kind of flip through it, because like I said, we're not going to look at each of these pages like we normally do. We're just kind of flip through the different sections. And this is brand new, so these sheets are a little sticky together. And then we have the place of the Ardennes campaign in World War II. Great information, great pictures. Love the maps too to help you formulate the situation in your head a little bit better. This is cool because that's actually on the cover of Danny's book, The Battle of the Bulge. That picture. What did the battle accomplish? What could the Germans have achieved? Allied intelligence failure. Then we get the references and sources. And there's a lot of that, as you'd expect. Someone as thorough as Danny is, he's going to have a lot of information here, including listing his own stuff as well. And that's one thing I love to see Danny do, is I've told him already, need to do a documentary on the Battle of the Bulge. I think it would be fantastic if he did. German order of battle in the Battle of the Bulge. This is going to be something for the data geeks out there. They're really going to dig this because he goes into all the information on the OOB for the Germans as well as the Allies. Let's go ahead and just flip through these a little quicker because don't need to look that closely at these. For the data geeks, you're going to love this because there's just a lot of information in here. Then we have the evaluation of Allied and German divisional combat strengths in the Ardennes offensive. And wow, more data. Just so cool. So much information to look through. And then I love the spreadsheet here. Breaks down the effectiveness of small arms, tank guns and AT, mortars and rockets, artillery for U.S. infantry regiments, battalions, and U.S. Cav squadrons. That's going to be real interesting to look at as well. Some tanks. Intrinsic combat effectiveness factors due to leadership and experience. The human factor and how important that is. Then we have German forces. U.S. forces, breakdown of each of the different units. And then we have the concluding thoughts, and then we are at the back of the historical studies. And that is a look at everything you get inside of The Last Gamble Designer Signature Edition. This is a game designed by Danny Parker, and it is published by Compass Games. Well, first thing I want to say is congratulations to both Danny and Compass in getting this game out. Fantastic production quality from Compass, as we've come to expect, and there is a lot of fantastic components in this game. Just, you see all those player aids up there for the order of battle and the tracks and everything for the different scenarios. These 3 fantastic books, the counters, the map, nice thick map that we've got now. Just an amazing job by Compass. And that is all thanks to the amazing hard work and knowledge of Danny Parker for the Battle of the Bulge and how he translated that from his own knowledge into this designer signature edition of Hitler's Last Gamble, which has now been renamed The Last Gamble. And what a fantastic game it is. And it's going to be really challenging because the movement aspect of the game is going to be the most difficult for people to get their heads around, because it's not just going to be moving with, little to no repercussion. And as we see in most war games, it's usually pay an extra movement point or something, or maybe you can't pass through one piece of terrain, you just go around it, things like that. Here, you can very easily get yourself congested and log jammed very quickly in the terrain because it is restrictive, it's difficult to move through, and I'm sure it's going to be like frustrating a lot of people when they're playing, but at the same time it's going to be fun because you're going to be experiencing what the commanders felt on the field themselves without the threat of danger that these guys had to deal with. But I think it's going to be a great game to sit down, play, enjoy, and at the same time have a sense of study of the campaign for the Battle of the Bulge. So that's going to be really great. Any Battle of the Bulge fans out there, this is a no-brainer. You need to get this. Anyone who's even slightly interested in the Battle of the Bulge, definitely check this out. Yeah, it's got a 75-page rule book, but we also did a 5-part series on the Learn to Play, which was done by Rich Hoffman, the lead developer, and he did a fantastic job on the teach. So go check those videos out. They will help you tremendously in grokking the game. And there's just going to be a lot of fun, I think, playing this game. And at Compass Expo in November, they're going to be playing, I think, 2 or 3 different games of this at the same time, so that should be real interesting. So if you're heading over there, get yourself signed up for that because it should be a lot of fun. Well, the game is shipping now, and if you've not already put in your order, do so today before it gets sold out. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. If you have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.